My name's Sam Isaacson. Thanks so much for joining today. I work for Grant Thornton, and I lead our coaching services work to our clients. And so that includes delivery of coaching, delivery of coach development services, including an EQA accredited coach development program, and an apprenticeship in partnership with BPP, and also advice to organizations around how to use coaching well and get the most value out of it and demonstrate that value so that senior people in the business can see why they're spending this money on it and hopefully want to increase that money as well to see an increased level of benefit. Now, the purpose of this session today is meant to be a round table. So it's quite a big round table. We've got 50 something people who are logged in today. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to hear from absolutely everyone. Bearing in mind the size of it and the nature of this sort of thing, it's kind of difficult to know what to expect. And so I have prepared some content. I thought it would be helpful at some point for me to walk through kind of what the basic principles are that we should be thinking about as coaches when we're increasing the level of technology we're using and having that maybe imposed upon us. And also thinking about sharing a couple of demos. I've got some different pieces of technology you might be interested in knowing about and maybe using with your clients or sharing with other coaches that you're connected to. But before we do that, I thought it would just be good to kind of open the space up and hear who we've got in the room and maybe start a bit of a conversation before it just gets dominated by me. And so I wonder if you would just open up the chat window and maybe just drop in a couple of initial questions, and then let's invite a bit of a discussion before I go into any of my content. That would be great. Okay, we've got one or two questions coming in. Thank you, Wendy. We've got Wendy joining from Surrey, and we've got someone from Scotland and Wiltshire. I wonder if we got anybody from outside of the UK, from Brisbane, as in Australia, Brisbane. Goodness me, what time must it be for you? Oh, it's just evening, isn't it? No, not too bad. Somebody from Spain, Greece, lovely. Right, so we've got, can the digital space replace or replicate face-to-face coaching? Yeah, good question. Looking forward to hearing about others' digital experience of coaching. I'd love to come away knowing some additional digital tools to support me in delivering great coaching for and with clients. What do you mean by digital? Oh, goodness me, that's a good question, isn't it? I have a digital watch somewhere. Okay, so let's start with this first question. Can the digital space replace or replicate face-to-face coaching? I'd love to hear some thoughts. We've got a whole bunch of different people on the call, and it would be interested to hear. Obviously, we've all had to experience digital coaching over the last 20 months or so, and so it would be good to hear what people are. What people's experiences have been in terms of the combination in comparing that against face-to-face. So somebody in the chat, I often find embodied coaching work easier face-to-face. Yes, that's a common comment, isn't it? That the coaching work that happens through video often doesn't feel as embodied, and actually there's some technology that can allow it to become more embodied, which I can talk to us about a little bit later. We've got somebody else saying, I've enjoyed mentoring digitally. It's Anna. Most of my work is with young entrepreneurs, and they're in the digital space already. Okay, that's an interesting point around rapport. That the people, when a coachee is actually very comfortable with using digital and wants to connect in that way, actually we can increase the level of rapport that we have with them by matching their digital journey. And of course that can happen both ways. If we're working with somebody who has less of an appetite for technology than we do, then we sometimes need to tone it down a little bit. Most of my clients now meet on Zoom, seems to work well. And hi, Sue from the UK, getting used to digital, much prefer face-to-face for picking up body language and subtle signals. Yeah, that's an interesting one, isn't it? That's what people did start talking about at the beginning of the lockdown period. And I'm still curious to know what's the difference? Is it a 2% difference, 20% difference? And what does that mean as technology starts to develop? And like I said, we can look at some of those later on today. It's a very effective format, saving time on travel. There are also less late changes. It works well. Yeah, this is a good point, isn't it? It's much more efficient working remotely. I've been using digital quite a bit recently, but body language is not obvious, and using digital provides more opportunities to coach across borders. Yes, and previously, if we were to have to meet face-to-face across borders, then there are all sorts of impacts in terms of time and cost, and obviously impact on the environment. If you don't have to travel by plane, then there are lots of benefits to that. During periods of confinement, I found coaching on the phone was preferable to Zoom or Teams. Yes, let's not forget that we are allowed to still do phone coaching, giving clients a visual break and helping me to avoid distractions like the self-view. Yeah, I completely agree. It's incredibly intense, isn't it, staring into a screen? I'm experiencing it right now. I've got dozens of faces that I'm having to look at, and it seems to just be me speaking, despite saying that I didn't really want to. Who'd like to actually come off mute and contribute a question or just a thought that's coming to them and join the conversation that way? Yeah, no, don't need to ask permission. Just take yourself.
Yeah, just giving you a nudge. I would. Yeah, it's interesting because it was during the first lockdown, when we were most of us working from home, that I realised how much I enjoyed the coaching element of my job more than the rest of my job. And it was the digital experience, one-to-one, getting really close with my clients, those that my colleagues, those that I managed, without interruptions. I was a deputy head teacher, so there were quite often interruptions going on through the school. And actually to have those moments of clarity and actual being able to hold the space and keep it safer. It felt safer online than it did sometimes in the school building, because, as I say, there were obviously a lot of distractions. So for me, it was my yaha moment, time to get out of what I was doing and start doing this. I've had the opportunity to have a couple of face-to-face sessions, which has been amazing, absolutely fantastic. But I think the reality is that this is a great way to be going forward. And although there are some things that are missed, I think with digital technology, there's an awful lot to be gained, I think. And certainly one of the most of the feedback I get from my clients is that they feel really safe. Especially if they're feeling quite vulnerable, they feel this is a really, really safe space. And I kind of just, I say, I'm here, there's nobody else here, it's just me, and I nothing is going to be shared and all of those things. So I think there are bonuses and benefits and bonuses both ways, but for me, it's certainly been, I think it's actually got my business going. So yeah, just wanted to share that.
Brilliant. No, thank you, Charlie.
Could I add one there to Sam? Because I've finding recently, and it's only recently, that in the beginning, I agree with Charlie that they were much more focused on the screen at home when they were sitting at home, because they didn't have the office distractions. But recently, it seems like everybody is starting to have 2 or 3 screens at home. They're getting their setup so much more technology advanced, and I'm noticing how their eyes are darting around. So I have to now contract quite clear at the beginning. Please turn everything off. I didn't have much of that in the beginning of the lockdown.
Yes, I agree. For those faces that I can see, if you recognize this particular image, you just stick your hand in the air so that I know if you've seen it or not. Okay, a couple, but not many. Okay, so I'm going to play you a short clip. It's only a couple of minutes long. It's a clip from a few years ago, 2016, I think, from memory, of a tool called Google Duplex, which is basically Google Assistant, but Google Assistant with some tweaks. So the Google Assistant is going to try to call up a hairdresser to make an appointment for the user. So you've said, okay, Google, book me an appointment that will fit into my calendar. And we're going to get to hear the conversation that Google has with the hairdressing attendant. Here we go. Enjoy.
Let's listen.
So how can I help you? Hi, I'm calling to book a women's haircut for a client. I'm looking for something on May 3rd. Sure, give me 1 second. Sure, what time are you looking for around? At 12 p.m. We do not have a 12 p.m. available. The closest we have to that is a 1:15. Do you have anything between 10 a.m. and 12 p.m.? Depending on what service she would like. What service is she looking for? Just a woman's haircut for now. Okay, we have a 10 o'clock. 10 a.m. is fine. Okay, what's her first name? The first name is Lisa. Okay, perfect. So I will see Lisa at 10 o'clock on May 3rd. Okay, great. Thanks. Great. Have a great day. Bye.
Those that haven't seen that before, I wonder what your thoughts are. Maybe just stick a word in the chat of what that's triggered for you, or yeah, if you'd like to come off mute and make a comment or ask a question, then please do that as well. Okay, we've got impressive, scary, weird. Yeah, does seem very realistic. Yeah, you know, the thing that feels quite realistic about it for me is the accent. It's, you know, it's obviously based around Silicon Valley, and they all have that American accent that kind of comes up at the end. And the computer has got the same voice, got the same accent, makes it sound very realistic, impersonal and annoying, helpful. Reminded me of AI used in coaching. Thank you, Barbara, for making that link. Yes, scary, amazing, seamless, real. Felt like talking with a machine. I wonder, you know, when Google launched this at first, and it is launched now, it's real. So when you go on Google Maps and you click on your local co-op or something and you see what times is it open, the way that Google has found out that information sometimes is that Google Duplex has made a call to the shop and said, can you just tell me your opening times, please? And they get a reply. And then they might do that a couple of times over the course of a couple of weeks to just validate that it's right. And then that data gets used. And when they started to do that, then people had a problem with the fact that they were having conversations with a machine and they didn't realize it. And that felt like it was unethical. And so now they have to have this little announcement at the beginning. You're about to have a conversation with a computer. Is that okay? And then you go into a very natural conversation. Yeah, so we've got somebody feeling confused. Efficient, it's good, very human-like. We need to learn to live and work with these new technologies. And the computer can have better pronunciation than you. But don't worry, Barbara, if your name looks Greek, I'm guessing that you've got Greek heritage at least. And so your accent is probably not much worse than mine, to be honest. And I've lived here my entire life. I suppose the interesting thing to point out there is it is incredibly realistic, and there's an example that it shows a couple of minutes later on into that presentation where the conversation happens with somebody who's got an incredibly strong accent that means most English people, you know, most native English speakers wouldn't be able to understand what the person is saying, but the computer does. And so actually it's better than a human at having a human conversation. And it's very efficient. You know, you can do that if you've got the computing power, and the computing power is there in principle, you could have that conversation with a limitless number of organizations simultaneously. So in terms of being able to, you've already made the link to coaching, it's incredibly inefficient having a human coaching a human, because we can only do one at a time. Even group coaching, then we tend to coach one individual at a time, you know, within the group, and other people might be benefiting from listening, but it's actually, you know, we're doing it to one person at a time. And being able to do that too at a theoretically limitless number of people, it feels to me unethical to not want that to happen. If you, for example, could coach the 10,000 people within an organization, every single one simultaneously, that feels like it's so efficient. And if you can get that to do coaching to the same level of quality as a human can, then surely it's a good idea. Question, who does this benefit? The people receiving the coaching would benefit. If we believe coaching is a good idea and that people who receive coaching benefit from it, then surely delivering it to hundreds of thousands of people simultaneously has got to be a better idea than one. And yet the question is about quality. And so is a machine capable of reproducing coaching to the same level of quality as it is of booking a hairdressing appointment? The answer to that at the moment is absolutely not. I noticed that there are some other questions coming, and I'm just trying to clear this off my screen so I can show you something else. Skynet sending its regards. Yeah, so artificial intelligence is not conscious yet. Doesn't know what it's doing. It is told to do something and it achieves that goal. Again, which is better than humans. You know, when you first started learning how to be a coach and you had to train yourself to use open questions, and you had to train yourself to not interrupt, and you had to train yourself to just follow a model and not be judgmental or directive. A machine never has any of those problems. You just tell it, don't judge. And then it accepts that rule and off it goes. You tell it, follow the grow model. And a machine is very capable of following the grow model. There's an interesting artificial intelligence coach tool that you can access for yourself on Facebook Messenger. It's called Coach Vici, V-I-C-I. And in fact, I think it's probably easier to access it if you go to coachvici.com. It seems quite difficult to access through Facebook for some reason. But it uses Facebook Messenger as its technology. And it's just a little decision tree. It asks a sequence of questions, and you respond to those questions, and it takes you through grow model quite effectively. It doesn't feel to me like it's actually coaching. It feels like a kind of self-reflection exercise that's facilitated by this tool. I'm just going to scroll back through these questions, see what people have been saying in the chat. If people know they are being coached by a robot, could this affect feelings of commitment and accountability? Yeah, quite possibly, or maybe not. Actually, the studies have shown that when people have got like an app on their phone that's tracking their activity and is asking them questions every so often, and they're recording those feelings in a journal, and maybe they're sharing across a sort of peer-to-peer relationship with another anonymous user, so they're getting a level of accountability there. It works incredibly well. And the question really isn't, is a machine able to deliver coaching to the same level of quality as a human can, or as the best human can? The question is a machine capable of delivering coaching to a sufficient level of quality and at a sufficient level of efficiency that it is more ethical to use it than not use it? At the moment, I don't think the technology is there. And it's because of it has to be following a linear model at the moment. It has to go through grow in a sequence of questions. It isn't good enough. That little illusion of a conversation that we've just seen, coaching robots are nowhere near good enough, and they won't ever be. And the reason they won't ever be is because the sort of the size of a data set that you would need to be able to generate that sort of quality, and the level of intelligence really that you'd need within the artificial intelligence in order to automate coaching is so great that by that point almost all other professions would have all been automated, and therefore what would the coaching be for? It would be for something else. It would be around well-being, and actually artificial intelligence in a sort of therapy context is much further ahead. Questions of a robot can be right, but the relationship between coach and client is not going to be there. Okay, yeah, now that's a good point. This really comes down to what's the definition of coaching, doesn't it? Does a coach and a coachee need to have a relationship, or is it a transaction where the coach is delivering a service to a coachee and the coachee can leave and the relationship doesn't mean anything? And I think there would be some people who are delivering coaching today that don't feel a need for a long relationship. There's certainly one big provider of coaching that's out there at the moment that doesn't guarantee you that you'll have the same coach from session to session. You have one coach, and then if that coach isn't available, you get a different coach next time. So that the people are making these decisions. Now, in my book, I like to talk about there's different stakeholders that have got they've got roles to play within the world of coaching and technology, and they're making these decisions for us. And the people who should be making those decisions really are coaches. The reason for that is that we actually value the profession, and the coachees that are receiving our services, they're actually getting coached. They're not having any sort of say, and we need to act as their advocates to be able to say, actually, is this benefiting coachees, or are we doing something else? Is it only benefiting the technology providers at the cost of everybody else? Do you believe that AI will achieve a level of compassion necessary for mentoring and coaching? Well, categorically, AI cannot have compassion. Compassion is a human activity, isn't it? But can it give the illusion of compassion through matching the sort of body language that you would expect, or the sort of words and tone of voice that you would use if you had empathy with somebody? Oh, it already does that. In fact, it does it better than most humans do. So in terms of feeling a level of compassion, you could be convinced of that by a robot, but there's an ethics question around, whether you tell somebody they're being coached by a robot or not, which of course you should. Can a robot be as creative as people are? Now, I would like to show you a little website here. This is a really fun website. After this session, I would encourage you to go and play on this website for a little bit, because it will blow your mind. This guy, his name is, I was going to come up with a name. So normally when I show this website to people, then I like to just come up with a pretend backstory for this person. But the problem is this person does not exist. And this website is called thispersondoesnotexist.com. And if you navigate to it, then it will just generate for you in the moment a randomly generated photorealistic image of a person. So can a computer be creative? Well, it's just created that. And the quality of that, I mean, it's way better than I could do. It's probably way better than everybody on this call could do. It's probably way better than pretty much 7 billion people in the world could do. It is, the quality of it is insanely good. This is not a photo. It's been generated in the moment. Let's just load a different one and just see what else comes up. It just creates pictures of people. Oh, now that's weird. Do you see this? What is that? There's some purple something that's kind of creeping onto this image, the face. And there's something odd going on with the hair. It doesn't feel right. Can those faces that I can see, do you nod if you agree with me that it just doesn't feel right? Computers, as creative as they are, they don't get what they're doing. They just follow a process. And this process that it's following it's making something that it feels is like a human face. And it is like a human face. It's remarkably realistic. And then you notice that and you think, a human would never make that mistake. There's a really interesting, you can watch the videos of it, AlphaGo, which was the Google DeepMind artificial intelligence tool that played Go, the game Go, against the world Go champion, which was historically seen as pretty much the most complex game that you could ever ask a computer to play, because the number of moves that you can make it's something like there are more potential moves in Go than there are molecules in the universe or something. It's insanely complicated. And they did 5 games, and I think the final score was 4-1 to the computer. I think it probably didn't need to be. It probably could have been 3-2 to the computer. But in the one that it lost, it's because the computer got to a point of looking at the moves that it could see ahead of it, and it couldn't think of a way of strengthening its position. And so it just did something stupid because it thought of doing something that a human wouldn't think of doing. And in another game, it did something a human would never think of doing, and it won the game. But in that one, it caused it to lose it. And when we think about coaching, the coachee being the recipient of any sort of technology you can use, particularly in artificial intelligence when it's being creative. And artificial intelligence isn't always creative. So we need to be careful with, when we're talking about artificial intelligence, what the difference is between those two approaches. One is the sort of linear follow a grow model approach, and the other is the creative one. When it's the creative one, how do we make it so it doesn't make mistakes? We don't want it to make any mistakes. That's part of the benefits of using technology, is that it's consistent every time. And so we need to be careful with that sort of thing. But this website is quite extraordinary. If you think that computers can't be as creative as humans, this one, it even comes up. Look at this. There's pictures of horses. This horse doesn't exist. Funny, isn't it? Just keep going through the chat. Maybe we should compare this to self-coaching or books that suggest sequence of questions to ask yourself. Yes, yeah, and I completely agree. That's basically what it is. And so I think that there's a bit of a reframe that we probably should do with ourselves around, what is artificial intelligence coaching? Is it actually coaching, or is it something else, a different practice that is maybe complementary? Coaching is about being listened to and heard. Would you feel the same when it's in computer listening? See, again, it's interesting. Emma, thanks for the question, because it's, for a start, as a coach, I'm a coach. I'm sort of assuming, maybe I'm assuming incorrectly, but I think it's probably true that everybody on this call is a coach. When we're in the middle of a coaching session, there are points at which we are distracted by something and we haven't quite listened to what's just been said. And that never happens to a computer. A computer is always listening. It's always listening to the point that it can produce you a full transcription of everything that you've said, every single time you've said it. So what's the difference there between having a computer listening to you and a human listening to you? There's definitely a difference, isn't there? But we need to be careful with how we're kind of trying to call out the problems with using machines in a way that isn't, well, I do this and the machine can't do it, because in almost all cases, machine does it better. That's the problem. As soon as you define something to a functional level, you're able to make a robot do it, and do it exactly the same way every time, do it way more efficiently, almost guaranteeing a level of quality. Data privacy. Rena, thank you. Is your face on the screen? I can't see your face, I don't think, but thank you so much for asking this question. So, data privacy. Now, I'd like to draw a distinction here between three words that are used. Oh, Rena, hi, thank you. Glad to see your face so I can thank you in person. There are three words that are used. We use them interchangeably, and yet they mean different things. They particularly mean different things in the world of technology. As coaches, one of the foundations of our craft is confidentiality. The fact that the conversations are confidential increases the level of trust that a coachee has in us and has in the conversation, and therefore allows them to have more freedom in where they go. A coachee is able to talk about absolutely anything they want to, and apart from some minor exceptions, which have never come up for me at least, we're never going to break that confidentiality, and they know it. So they say the words, they go into our ears, and that's the point at which they stop. I don't know about you. I tend not to take notes, and if I do take any notes, tend to be on my own performance rather than on what the coachee is saying. That information isn't going to go anywhere. It's confidential. That's what confidentiality means. Data privacy, on the other hand, is that relates to compliance with data privacy regulation. In Europe, it's GDPR, the General Data Privacy Regulation. In the UK, it's the Data Protection Act. In the US, it's the Data Privacy Shield. And there's different versions of this around the world. GDPR is the most, it's the strongest. They demand more. There's more of an attitude towards the fact that you own your own personal data. And so what that means is, if I interact with an organization and I provide some personal data to them, I expect that they are going to protect that personal data appropriately for the purposes that I've given it to them for, which means deleting it after they've finished using it. It means only passing it to authorized individuals, not allowing unauthorized access, trying to protect it as well as they can through data transfer and storing that data, etc., etc. The difference there is that if I'm being coached, and obviously the sort of information that I pass across in a coaching session is incredibly sensitive in nature, highly personal. It's all about me, and it's all about the most difficult parts of my life. It's the most important sort of data to me. If I pass that across to a coach in an organization, then in compliance with data privacy regulation, they could record, for example, and this is more than an example, really, it's a real life example. They could record a full transcription of every coaching session in a text file that is accessible by them, every other coach within the organization, all of the technology support team so that they can get access to it and make any changes that they need to in order to improve the systems. And anybody who's got kind of super user access across those systems, probably including third parties that will have support for all the different levels of technology, hardware and software for that entire organization. And depending on the size of that organization, that could quite easily be thousands of people. And that's compliant with data privacy regulation. And if those systems got hacked, which is unlikely, but is still very possible if you haven't protected it well enough, providing that you have done your best efforts to protect it, you aren't actually going to be punished for it. You might be shamed in the media, but that's kind of the worst you're going to get. Whereas the GDPR, the biggest fine you can get is something like 5% of your global revenue, which if you're a big organization is a huge amount of money. So it's there as a bit of a threat, but actually if you've done the best job you can, you're not going to get punished for it. So is data privacy the same as confidentiality? No, it's nothing like it. Those two are completely different ideas. If you tell me a piece of information in a coaching session and it goes nowhere, that's confidentiality. If it goes to thousands of people who have authorized access to it, that's very different. The third word is security. And lots of technology providers will tell you how great their security protocols are. And they'll say, yeah, we keep your information confidential because our security procedures are there. What that means is that they're using information security tools to prevent unauthorized access to the data and to detect unauthorized access when it happens in order to restrict it further, which is kind of halfway towards data privacy, I suppose. And of course, they're interrelated. If you want something confidential, it does need to be secure. And if you want the privacy, then there has to be security involved. But just don't fall into the trap of thinking, I want my data to be held confidentially, and feel like if you've got your information security certificates, that's the case, because it isn't. All of the IT administrators, for example, will have full access to the data. They have to by their nature. That's a little bit of a high horse of mine, so thanks very much, Rena. Tell you what, actually, I'm going to just pause at this point and take a little bit of a tangent, because there are no real tangents, as we know. You know, if somebody says something, then it's because there's a valid reason it's connected to everything. When we're thinking about technology and coaching, in fact, with any sort of technology, actually, there are four sorts of issues that can go wrong. The biggest one is confidentiality. And this is so important for us as coaches that it's at the point where I feel like if there's going to be any sort of impact on that, then I don't want to use that technology at all. We're going to draw a line in the sand. If I'm going onto a coaching platform and the coaching platform asks me to record their notes from our coaching sessions or record their goals or that sort of thing, then I feel like confidentiality is fundamental to the coaching practice, and so I'm not going to do that. And it's good to just know where our own boundaries lie. So confidentiality, single most important thing we need to be thinking about with technology. The other three are just things that we need to be conscious of because they affect the way that we use them. The first one is change. We live in a world that we're surrounded by change all the time. Technology is a big instigator of that change, of course, but the system itself could change. So we're using Teams today. I could have logged on this morning and Teams have just decided that they've rolled out an update and have changed the interface. So I don't know where the buttons are anymore. That happens, right? You know, we log onto a system that we've used every day forever and suddenly we don't know where anything is because they've rolled out this helpful change that makes it more intuitive, and apart from those that have already used it. And also the environment around it can change. In fact, it always does change. Is that the nature of technologies is constantly changing around us. And so the version of Microsoft Teams that we've got set up today actually was designed to operate in an environment. And the only thing that we know for sure is that it is not the environment we're operating it in today. And so that means that things will go wrong with it. In particular, it'll lead us on to the second issue, which is availability. Technology can just sometimes not work. We try to use it, and it just doesn't do what we expect it to do or what it's meant to do, or they've just taken it down to roll out an update, or their system has been hacked, which means that the website has been shut off or something like that. And so anytime that we're using technology, we always have to have a backup ready in case it doesn't work. And then the third thing is a reliance on data. And almost all technology, it it isn't truth at all if it does. And I'll show you some today that doesn't really need a big level of technology for it to be able to work. But technology tends to rely on data in order for it to work well. And therefore, that data needs to be accurate and complete. Otherwise, what we see is not the truth. And it might be inaccurate because at the data capture stage, it's been just put in wrong. And that could be for any kind of reasons, that it's been designed badly. And so the data is coming in wrong. It could be relying on an interface with another system, and the interface has stopped working, or the other system has stopped working, or has changed the way it's producing its data output, or something like that. It might be that once it's inside the system, there are some calculations or processes that are taking place on the data, which is generating a bad level of output. And so it's actually changing it to being false where it's originally true. And by the time that we finally end up looking at it, it may be that it's presenting it in a way that's not true. For example, it could take the field headings and misalign them by one. It's a very simple thing that can happen. And so it's telling you that, you know, the average coaching price is X, and actually it's telling you the minimum coaching price. And so you get the wrong piece of information. And the problem is, when you look at data presented in a system, it looks so official. Have you noticed this? If you see a pie chart of any kind of rubbish, you suddenly just believe it. You instantly believe it because it's been presented in a pie chart, and therefore it must be true. And it is what happens. So we need to be conscious of the fact that systems, they change, and the environment around them changes. They become unavailable. The data there's a risk that it's not going to be right, and particularly confidentiality. So thank you, Rena. There you go. Wow. How long did that take to answer that very simple question? The neuroscience and AI could read human mind possibly, hence AI will do 70% and 30% is still needed to be done by a human being. Yeah, it's a very good point. The sort of level of information that we've got at the biological level about us is very great now, and produces much higher quality information input to our coaching sessions than just, oh, how are you feeling today? If you're able to track somebody's heart rate variability over a 12-month period and say, oh, what's happening here? That's a great level of insight that we can bring. I can see how a machine could effectively deliver more transactional coaching. Yeah, are they capable, or will they ever be, of coaching at a deeper level, working with beliefs, emotions, identity? Thanks, Jeanette. Yeah, we'll see, I suppose, won't we? Depends how you're going to do it. If we're working at that sort of embodied way of, I noticed that you're feeling a level of emotion, so I'm just going to feel that emotion with you for a moment. Robots can't do it. Robots don't feel emotion. But asking good questions to get there, maybe they could. Robots are not efficient coaches at the moment, so in the future, can they be? Some coachees may not feel the need for a relationship. They feel they only want answers quickly. Yeah, so sometimes we need to disrupt coachees actually in it, don't we? And there's a little bit of a danger, like I say, about breaking coaching down to these kind of functional requirements and then developing that into a piece of technology. Do you think in future AI will be able to understand emotional nuances? They actually can. There's some interesting studies that have been done. Oh gosh, I can't remember. Some American university, MIT probably. I think it's MIT. It's in the book, where it looks at the face of somebody receiving therapy. It's developed quite far in the therapy world rather than coaching, and it can detect that the tiniest micro expression, tiniest little flicker of an eyebrow or a gulp or something like that, and it can detect those and then respond with an appropriate facial expression or some sort of question to help that. Can AI be as great an artist as Picasso or Beethoven? So, Barbara, the answer to that is there was a study done by Oxford University in, I think, 2011. Sounds about right. Which said that within 50 years, robots will be better than humans at everything. I think that's what it said. I'm pretty certain that's what it said. You can go and look it up. But it was very specific about saying it would be able to write a best-selling fiction book or a 5-star screenplay better than a human can. Does a computer reflect? Computers do what you tell them to, I'm afraid. So if you tell a computer to, then it will do it, and it does all sorts of creative things that we tend not to imagine that they're able to. There's a really interesting little experiment that they did. I think it was IBM, where they set up 2 machines, and all they gave them was language. So they said, here's, you can understand language and you can speak language, and so can you. We're not going to give you a topic. We're just going to ask you to communicate. And quite quickly, they started having a conversation, and they worked out, these 2 machines, that the words that they were using weren't efficient enough to communicate what they wanted to. And so they started to invent their own language. And it was within 6 hours, they had stopped using English altogether and were just using noises that the people that had designed them didn't understand. And so they switched them off because they were getting a bit scared that they were communicating in this new language, just making noises. So computers, they've got all kinds of capabilities. But we think of that as that whole Skynet. Oh, well, what happens if they just decided to, set off every nuclear bomb one day? And they could. If you let them, if you tell them never do that, then they will never do it. Computers do what you tell them to do. It's a bit annoying, really, isn't it? There can be moments of inspiration in those slight moments of distraction. Yeah, robots are not humans. I guess a computer listens completely without judgment or bias. In principle, yeah, absolutely right. However, computers have all been programmed by humans. Humans do have bias. Artificial intelligence, the creativity, does rely on large data sets, and data sets are inherently biased. And if you look at the makeup of professional coaches in terms of just our demographics, we are embarrassingly not diverse. If you're white and middle class and middle aged, and particularly if you're a woman, you are absolutely dominate the coaching world. Is something like 95% of coaches, professional coaches globally, are middle-aged, middle-class white. And so do we want, if we want to have a good quality data set by using professional coaches, that's what it's going to look like. And that's just looking at skin color. We're not even thinking there about anything more complicated in terms of personality differences I end up bringing in that side of things. So yeah, there's a huge amount of bias inside data sets. There was an interesting Netflix documentary, Coded Bias, if you're interested in learning a bit more about that. I'm going to take Sunandaraman. I should never have tried pronouncing that, should we? We've got somebody with a hand up. If that is you, would you mind just taking yourself off mute? Oh, I can see your face. Yeah, take yourself off mute and ask the question, please.
Yes, so my question is with related to security, confidentiality, et al. It's that we do know. I mean, I don't know enough about artificial intelligence to be able to to have an idea about this. But we do know that when a computer is actually listening to you and answering your questions, it's being recorded somewhere. For instance, if you look at Alexa, till the time that the whole controversy over the recordings being listened to by Amazon employees didn't come up, we didn't realize that these conversations that we have with Alexa are being recorded and kept somewhere. So how does artificial intelligence, in terms of if we have these platforms dealing with confidentiality, really work? Is this being stored somewhere, even if it's for a short while? Then what are the risks therefore?
Well, yeah, no, that's the point. It isn't confidential. So, and by its nature, it has to not be. So just at a very practical level, when you're speaking to Alexa or whatever, then your voice data is being interpreted by the listener. That data is being sent to the processor of that data. So if Alexa is not connected to the internet, doesn't work, the reason it doesn't work is because the data has to travel somewhere. Has to travel to the servers. They're probably located in, well, it'll be local to you. They've got a few farms around the world. And so it'll be sent to that local data spot, it'll be processed, and then the response will be sent back. It's very quick, the internet is very fast nowadays, but the data is having to travel somewhere. And typically, you can turn this setting off, I think. It'll depend on exactly how you're interacting with it. Typically, it's all going to be stored because it continuously learns. It wants to make sure that it's performing the right thing. If somebody tries to call Alexa and asks the same question multiple times, or seems to ask it a number of similar questions in quick succession, it wants to learn how to improve itself. So the data has to be stored somewhere. Now, in principle, people shouldn't be having to look at that data, and they're looking at it in order to improve the technology, not in order to just spy on you. But in a coaching conversation, you just don't want people listening to that conversation, full stop. So yeah, we need to be careful about that. I do want to move the conversation on. I noticed that there's been a little bit of confusion. Sorry, I might have said that there were 5. I meant that there were 4. That the 4 issues are tendency to change, lack of availability, reliance on data that can be inaccurate or incomplete, and confidentiality. Yeah, what I'd like to talk to you about, I want to, so AI is largely speculative at the moment. It is going somewhere, and there's stuff that is happening in that space. Nothing's particularly happening right now. In the next few years, I expect some sort of linear growth style model will become a little bit more popular, particularly in big organizations. It isn't going to replace coaching. And even by the time that robots get good enough to be able to deliver full scale coaching as you or I would recognize it, the world will have changed so much that the profession will be very different. So I don't think be worried about it, but it's good to have an eye on it, and it's quite interesting, isn't it? And I think it'll start to develop the way that we act as coaches. It'll take some of the more boring bits out of our coaching so we can get into the more exciting human bits. The second thing I'd like to talk to you about is something that is right at the cutting edge of technology and is going to be coming quite rapidly as far as communications technology is concerned. And if you follow me on LinkedIn at all, and I noticed in the signups, then there were a couple of names that I recognized. And so this won't be particularly new for you, but it's happening right now. With the rename of Facebook to Meta a couple of weeks ago, you probably will have noticed that there's a huge push towards increasing the use of virtual reality. Meta alone in 2021 is going to be investing $10 billion, an insane amount of money, just in virtual reality, augmented reality, that sort of space, and are recruiting 10,000 people in Europe alone just to develop virtual reality technology. I would like to show you a virtual reality tool that I have used to coach people in, and it'll be interesting to kind of see what your thoughts are. So I'm going to try to share my screen now. Oh, that's nice. It's loaded us right there. What you're seeing on the screen at the moment is it's the world from orbit. So there you go, you can see the world floating by. I'll just leave it demonstrating now. Yeah. There's a chair there, there's a couple of other chairs around. I'm connecting this on my phone. You could use this app from a phone or from a PC or a Mac, or from a virtual reality headset. And as you can see, my hands are just moving around there of an avatar, because actually if I were to put this on as a headset, I would be seeing things from the face, through the eyes of my avatar. I can have a very pleasing conversation while we're orbiting the Earth. So you're able to look up and see maybe your city floating by, and just notice how small it is in comparison to the whole world, and notice where the world is just hanging in the middle of space, which can bring a very different lens onto a coaching conversation. Now, at the moment, in very practical terms, in order for me to experience this in virtual reality using my phone, I would need to change the view, which I'll do to show you kind of what it's like. Okay, so now I've got 2 eyes, one for my left and one for my right. And so this is now in 3 dimensions. And as I'm turning the phone, so you can't see what I'm doing, I'm physically turning the phone. The problem with this tool is, because it's so immersive, the only way that you can access the menu, I'm going to have to quit it and start again. Sorry, everybody. The only way that you can access the menu is through physically looking up into the sky and seeing this little silver ball that appears. And then that's how you access the menu, which means that when you're actually in the meeting, you don't get interrupted very much. It's a lot better than coaching by video, because when you coach by video, I'm looking into your face and you're looking into my face, and then every so often something will happen that just goes, oh yeah, I need to remember to do that thing because all my emails are open in the background, or somebody sends me an instant message, or I share a second screen, with a coaching model on it or something, and it's got my Facebook feed or something is there. Yes, a fault of technology. This is the problem, isn't it? Technology stops working, and as soon as you start to introduce it, it introduces more opportunities for things to go wrong. Excuse me. A really nice thing that you can do in this sort of platform, and you've just seen it. We've just gone into orbit. This really is quite inspiring being at orbit. You can go to all these different locations. This is quite a nice one. I quite like going here. When I start my coaching sessions, then I tend to invite people, where would you like to be coached today? A lot of people tend to choose this one, actually. It's got a quiet garden. There are some waterfalls off in the distance just behind me. There's a nice tree dropping some blossom. It's also got 3D audio. You can't tell for some reason. I tried to share the audio from it, but there's something, I've probably locked down the permissions on my phone because I'm so obsessed with confidentiality that it won't let me share the audio. But it's a very nice place to sit and just have a nice conversation with somebody that's very different from the same room that they've been when they've been at work all day. I'll just show you one more location because there's something quite special that you can do in the boardroom. Depending on the location that you're in, it does impact the sort of things that you talk about in the conversation. So this one is a much more corporate environment, of course. Sit around this table. There's a big city that's around you in every direction. A little bit scary having that helicopter flying past every so often, but you kind of learn to ignore those sorts of distractions. This has got a nice big screen. You see there's a new button that has appeared at the bottom, this select image. I can select an image and share an image that I would like to discuss. I don't know if you use this kind of thing in your coaching, but you can bring something up on the screen and share a slide. But the way that you do that is, as we're seeing now, my face is now a tiny little face, and all you're seeing is the content that I'm sharing. And actually, when you're in a coaching session, you'd like the content to be present, but you don't really want to relegate our faces to be something less than that. We want it to be about the relationship. And in this way, I can share the content and we can look at each other, have a conversation, and then refer up to it. We're both looking at it. We can both see that we're looking at it and then look back to each other again. And so it's a much more pleasant interaction in that sense. And because you wear it in this headset that covers you, you have no distractions from the outside world. So I've noticed the escapism has been mentioned, and yeah, you're absolutely right. It kind of takes you out of reality. Hologram would be next. Danny, thanks very much for pointing that out. So in terms of, I said this is coming technology. Facebook, at the time they were called Facebook, of course now they're called Meta. I need to stop myself from saying that. Released earlier this year with Ray-Ban, the Ray-Ban Stories. Does anybody see the adverts for these stories, these glasses? So you can wear a pair of glasses. They're basically the same size as mine. They've got little cameras built into the edges here. And all that they can do, it's quite intentionally simplistic. All that they can do is take photos. You tap them and it starts a video, or you press and hold and it'll take a photo, and you can share it to Facebook that way. Built into a glass. It's just a pair of normal glasses, and you can get them in prescription. There's a new pair of smart glasses. Actually, I've got this on a slide. Let me share this slide so you can see it in person. Here we go. So the image in the middle is it's quite an advanced virtual reality headset. This one that was released last year or the year before, I think. So that they've got a bit smaller than that now. You can see that it is already. It hasn't got this whole kind of head strap going on. It's not too much bigger than a pair of glasses. It's not the sort of thing that you're always going to be wearing every day, but it's much smaller than, if you imagine that's what virtual reality used to look like, right? It doesn't look like that nowadays. It looks like this middle set. It's quite expensive. This set is something like £800 or £900, I think. But the leading virtual reality headset at the moment would be the Quest 2, which costs about £300. which is less than most people would pay for a smartphone if you're in the executive coaching space. This pair of glasses on the left is really interesting. This is produced by a company called Xiaomi. Xiaomi is the biggest manufacturer of smartphones in the world, particularly popular in China, but they're growing in popularity in India. In India, they're very popular as well, actually, but they're moving into Europe. The US doesn't like them because it's from China, but they'll get into the US as well, I expect. The thing that they're very famous for is producing really high quality smartphones at very, very affordable prices. And so they can get a phone that's the same quality as the latest iPhone, but it'll be like a quarter of the price or something like that. So I'm expecting these glasses to be released first quarter 2022. Maybe this is being recorded, isn't it? So that's going to come back to bite me if it isn't. And I expect the price will be between 100 and 150 pounds, I would have thought. You can just about see this little blue screen. I don't know if the contrast may not be that high to be able to demonstrate that to you, but there's a little screen that's basically being projected from inside the glasses onto it, which gives you a little overlay so that when you're just walking around and somebody calls you, you won't just see I've got a call, their face might appear in the air in front of you as far as you're concerned. And so you tap the glasses and answer the phone call, and it's got little ear pieces built into the glasses so that you don't need to wear earphones, but you can hear it anyway. It's quite special. And then you're able to see the person that you're talking to. It's not an animated face or anything, it's just their profile picture, but you can see it. And if you were driving around, then it would have the directions that you're meant to be driving being projected through your glasses so that you don't need a sat nav, because the sat nav is in your glasses. And they should be available on prescription as well, and it'll have cameras built into it. Now, the power in something like this, particularly if it's more affordable, is it'll have cameras built into all the outside of it, so it can detect where your hands are, and it might even be able to, if they've got cameras on the inside, to detect your facial expression as well. And that's the connection to the hologram, because then it can generate an image of you with your live facial expressions and your body language physically in front of a person. And so suddenly there's a change from meeting somebody remotely. You don't need to meet through video. You're wearing a pair of glasses. You probably will just end up wearing them all day, every day, because why wouldn't you? And so you just want to call somebody, you've got a meeting with somebody. So you just load up the meeting, and then the person is physically there in front of you as far as you can tell. You can't physically shake your hand, but if you're wearing a glove each that's got some haptic feedback built into it, and some of the things that they're developing at the moment are quite extraordinary, you'd be able to get the sense of that, a sense of warmth and a sense of tension against your hand. So you could shake somebody's hand and have a conversation with them in a very comfortable, relaxing way. So it isn't this intensity of staring into a screen. It's just a nice, relaxed environment. I've got a picture, I think, next. Oh, that's a picture of me coaching somebody in VR. So that's kind of what, the view was from inside my head. And then I was coaching somebody else sitting in that chair in a forest. So this might be what it looks like to go out for a coffee in 5 years. You go to a coffee shop, you've got your glasses on, they're meeting in their coffee shop, they've got their glasses on. As far as the two of you are concerned, you're sitting next to each other having a chat. Much more comfortable way to interact with people than meeting via video. And in terms of that sort of human interaction relationship piece, look, this is a really good way of building relationships, particularly for team coaching. I don't know if many of you have done team coaching through video. It is really hard. But one-to-one coaching is okay through video. I mean, I don't know what 85% as effective as in person. And stick a number on it. It's good enough to get through it. It's not as good, but it's pretty decent. Team coaching, goodness me, so hard, isn't it? But if you're there in virtual reality, and so I can actually turn. Actually, I've just noticed I'm still sharing that screen, isn't it? So you can't see what I'm showing you with my body. So you don't have to do that in VR because it just happens for you. You're right there. I have to turn from one person and then turn to another person, and everybody can see where my attention is. And in virtual reality, that's very natural. In video, you can't do that. So there's going to be a point in the next couple of years when Apple releases their device. That will be a huge consumer shift, but they aren't releasing it yet. They're saying that they're going to do one first half of next year, but I don't think it's going to be a pair of glasses like that. I think it's going to be, proper headset. They're going to enter that space first. In the next couple of years, I think Apple will bring something out and suddenly everybody will have one. And there will be a point where a coachee, will say to a coachee, when would you like your first session? And they'll say, oh, next Tuesday, here's my VR link. And we'll go, all right. So it's good to just kind of be prepared for that when it happens. What's the name of that application? That application is a free application called VTime XR. So VTIME space XR. And it's available for free on pretty much every platform. And then you can meet across platform in these virtual spaces. The image, you might have noticed or you might have missed it. There was a little cardboard box that there was an image of a couple of slides ago, that you can buy a little cardboard box for about £3, or you can just use any piece of cardboard and get a pair of lenses that will slot your phone into it and turns your phone into a virtual reality device, and you can meet that way. It's really nice. I guarantee you, if you use it and do, just do a half an hour meeting with somebody in it, and then put your headset off and think, would I prefer that to video if I had to meet somebody remotely? Yeah, definitely. Would you prefer it to in person? I think probably not. You can have some nice little games where you move to, go and sit and do a coaching session in orbit and that sort of thing. But in person is special, isn't it? Richard, you have your hand up. Please go ahead.
Yeah, thanks, Sam. Really fascinating. Can you hear me?
I can. Yeah, thank you.
I just wondered, presumably your coachee, or in a team situation, your coachees have to have the same technology as well, are used to using it, have to develop their own avatar. Is that the case? I'm assuming that's the case, being completely ignorant of this.
Yeah, it's a brilliant question, and it's a very interesting one, because when we start to use a new piece of technology, there is this learning curve, right? To get to a point where we feel like the technology isn't affecting us. I'm sorry, and I'm just conscious of time, and that's made me think I'd like to actually show you some stuff that you can use today. So I'm going to move straight onto that as soon as I say this. Virtual reality, particularly VTime XR, and it's designed this way, is so unobtrusive that when you have to download the app, and then when you open the app for the first time, it asks you what your avatar is going to look like, which is it's relatively intuitive. You can just accept the default random one it gives you, or you can change it to make it look like you or make it look like somebody else, which could be an interesting experience. Once you're into a session, though, and you can, as a coach who's used this and is comfortable with it, as a coach, you send an invite to the coachee. So they just click accept. And once they're in, they don't need to do anything. You just sit and talk, which is actually very different from video. Because even once you're in video, which is still, a click away, you're in, and suddenly, oh, stick something in the chat. Oh, I don't know how to do it. Where's the chat button? Whereas in virtual reality, you don't need to do that, because with VTime XR, it's so simplistic intentionally that you don't really have that sort of thing. But with other tools, the way that you would, write a note down is you reach out and you pick up a note, and then you physically have a pen that you write with because you know how to write. You stick it on a whiteboard, a virtual whiteboard. Spatial is the name of a good tool. You can do that sort of thing. So yeah, there is a little bit of a learning curve, as with any technology, but it's nothing like some of the technologies we've had to get used to. Psychological impact on humans isn't clear with technology. Does it concern you? Yeah, it does concern me. But to a certain extent, I'm weighing it up against. I'm never going to get to a point of thinking I've got to, I live next door to somebody who'd like me to coach them, and I'm going to suggest that we meet through technology or do something silly. I think, we're humans. That's the point of coaching, right? It's a human interaction. But if we can use technology to make it more human, then that probably is better than using another piece of technology. I'd really like to demonstrate a couple of bits of technology that you can use in a live coaching session that are quite fun. Oh, sorry, and I've just closed it by mistake. The first one I'll show you is what I've found with coaching technology is that technology that touts itself as being for coaching tends to be incredibly directive. I don't know if you've experienced this, if you've looked up any stuff, but it tends to be so closely aligned with a specific school of thought that as soon as I start to use it, I think, oh, this isn't really me. Whereas the stuff that I like tends to be a little bit more creative in nature. So I'm just going to share a screen. So this is magneticpoetry.com. And on magneticpoetry.com, there's a little button that says play online, and it's free. You can play magnetic poetry for free. So when I was a kid, then I had this little pack of magnetic words that you could stick on a fridge and make a little silly poem. Well, in a live coaching session, you could just bring up this website or send them a link so they bring it up themselves and share their screen with you. You can just send a link straight to this, and I had to click to get to it, but you don't need to do that. Just click straight onto this and say, use these words. It's intentionally restricted, and write a poem that, you know, that helps you to express what you currently go through. So they might say, not ugly, though. My girl sleeps. You just play around with it, and suddenly you've got a little bit of a coaching tool that injects a level of creativity in a similar way to, you know, some other tools that we might use in person with somebody, and it's quite playful, and it's using technology to actually increase the value of coaching for those of us that would like something like that. This is a different one, maybe something that's a little bit more widely used. If you use storytelling cards, you know, do picture cards, that felt like a big, you know, I have to start using video and I lose the ability to do this. Well, this is the way that you can do it, and it's quite a nice use of technology. Now, it's asking you a particular question. You don't have to follow the question, of course. You just kind of do it the way that it does. It just sends you a bunch of random colored spots, and if you hover over a spot, it'll stop moving. You say, oh, you know, to a coachee, pick a spot. Just find one and click on it. And when you click on the spot, it gives you a little picture card with a word on it. And if you click the read about, then it's got some little quotes and a little story, a little poem about it, some questions to reflect on. It's quite a nice little tool, isn't it? You know, you want to use some picture cards. This is a nice way of doing it. There are others, but this one for me just feels the most non-directive. The pictures are nice and big. It just makes you, you know, have something to think about, doesn't it? That's a nice, fun one, isn't it? I'd like to choose that one. That's what's working for me. And one more tool that I'll show you, and then I'll have a look at the questions about some others. Let's go into this demo. This is using computer games technology to allow you basically to use a sort of version of systemic constellations, but in this storytelling landscape. So I've put this avatar in. I'm just going to get it so that it's showing me what I am. So this is Sam saying, I'm not sure which way to go. And I've chosen the color orange to represent myself here for whatever reason. And for a coachee, that will matter. And you send them a link, and so they're the ones that are choosing their avatars, they're choosing the names. And you put yourself in a particular place on this landscape, and then you put some other people around. And so maybe I've got this character here, Mike, saying, come this way. And maybe I'm feeling like there's a bit of a wall between me and Mike at the moment. And so here's the wall, and that wall could have a name, time. And so then the question is, how do I get around that wall? And maybe that I'm seeing things in one way, I can see things from Mike's perspective. And Mike, oh, he's not looking at me in the same way that I'm looking at him. And that gives me a point to reflect. Or maybe I could look at things from a bit of a bird's eye view and, you know, have a little look around from different perspectives and see, oh, I'd never noticed that there's this bush behind me, and maybe that's got a meaning. This is a really nice tool to use with people. It's particularly creative. It's very helpful in that sort of tapping into metaphor and storytelling. It's quite a large landscape, really. There's plenty of space to play with, and there's a blank landscape you can play with as well. And there's loads of avatars you can kind of play around with, and I'm conscious of time, and so I don't want to just spend ages in it. But this is quite a nice one. This is particularly advanced. So in terms of that question around that learning curve. Virtual reality, I feel like you can get straight into that. There's no problem at all. With ProReal, it really needs time. Do you know Nolven? Oh God, sorry. Yes, please take yourself off mute and ask a question.
I wanted to ask, what would be your suggestion on how to get started?
Yeah, it's a good question. So I would think, and I mean, this is probably going to be different for everybody, isn't it? That the couple of things that I'd think are, think about the way that you like to coach, and think about the sort of tool that could hypothetically be helpful. So, for example, I like storytelling cards. One coach might say, and then just think, is there a digital version of that? And just do a quick internet search, and almost all the time, somebody will have done something. And then just do a little bit of research to kind of see what's possible. And then make sure you get used to using it. So I'd probably encourage you, find a buddy coach that you can sort of peer coach each other a few times and just get used to using it. Because when you're using a piece of technology in a coaching session live, you have to have your coaching head on, and you're also acting as technical support. If something goes wrong and they just go, oh, what does this black box mean? And you can't see the black box, you need to be confident enough to help to walk them through whatever issue they're going through. So do get comfortable with it before you drop it in. And some of them, like that magnetic poetry one, is so simple. You can't get it wrong. The only thing that people will do, and they will do it, is they'll refresh those words and end up with more words, but you want them to keep it restricted. So think about who you are as a coach and what might work, buddy it with somebody else, and then ask a coachee, what do you think might be helpful for you? What sort of creative ways might we work together? Actually, there's one that I haven't shown you. I could show you if we've got a bit of time, which generates soundscapes. That's really nice, actually. If we've got some time, I'll show that one as well. Question. So are we as coaches to supplement that virtual reality experience of the landscape with a conversation? Yes, so I assume that that's talking about ProReal, which is that sort of computer game one. And yes, so you're asking them to put in avatars and objects to represent something. So, they might say, having a problem with my line manager. So you say, oh, okay, let's add your line manager into the landscape, and you let them place the line manager where they feel like it would best suit, and choose a color and a name and all that stuff. Creative tool's really helpful. Thank you. What's the name of the last tool? Was that ProReal? ProReal? I think that's the one. What's your clients saying about their VR coaching sessions? They love them. Honestly. I mean, and obviously that's because I'm a great coach, but it's because we spend all of our lives at the moment interacting through video, and you think, I'm going to meet somebody remotely, and suddenly I stick on a headset and I can meet you in this beautiful Japanese garden with no distractions from anywhere else. No one's interrupting me. I just sit and relax. I just have an actual real life conversation with somebody, and I know it's an avatar, and it's so stylized. It's like I'm sitting in a cartoon, but the speed at which our minds just go, this is where you are now. It's quite amazing. Wendy, I see your hand. I'm assuming you're saying 5 minutes.
Yeah, just well, no, I can say that, but I just wanted to just reflect, offer a reflection of coaching during lockdown. And I can remember very early on realizing that my coachee was living in a one bed, a studio flat, where her bedroom and her lounge and her kitchen was all in the same room. And I can see now that if I'd offered her some kind of different environment, that actually might have been really great for her. So just want to thank you, Sam, for opening up our eyes to this. Thank you.
No, brilliant. Thank you all for being here. I really like it. What's been the feedback from your clients? I think that's probably the same sort of question about virtual reality in particular. But I think most I've found when I'm doing coaching and you use any sort of, coaches, we love a little box of tricks, don't we? Oh, you wait, I've got some Russian dolls. I'm going to get out these Russian dolls, and then we're going to line up the dolls. Which one do you think you are, and that sort of thing. It's always a fun little experience. And doing that with technology is just, it's an option that we all have. And you can replicate something like that Russian dolls exercise. Just prepare a PowerPoint slide with all of those Russian dolls pictures on them, and just share your screen and give them control and ask them to start moving things around or start writing things on the slide. You don't know how to use PowerPoint. They use it every day. It's the way that we use technology. I think we can probably get a bit more creative with the way we use what's available to us anyway. But something fun like a magnetic poetry, it opens up something because it's a bit different, isn't it? I'll just show you this, unless there's anything else that's coming in. Do you have a preferred whiteboard app to be used with a stylus? Great question. Yeah, so I like Jamboard because it's so simple. I like things that are simple. Google Jamboard is a free version that Google gives you. It's just so easy. There's nothing that you can do with it really. Whereas I know that there's others like Miro and what's the other big one? Begins with an M as well, doesn't it? Yeah, whatever. There's that Mural, where there's so much that you can do with it. It's like the first time you use it, there's all these things flashing around and a million buttons everywhere. I think it can feel a bit intimidating, and I like things that are nice and simple. And Google Jamboard, you already know how to use it. Basically, you log on. It's like you're going to use a pen or a sticky note, or you're going to add a picture. That's basically all you can do. So yeah, Google Jamboard, but it is very limited. I'm just going to share my screen one more time, and hopefully this will work with the sound. This is a really nice little website, mynoise.net. It's got more than 200 sound generators. You can use it for free, basically, but some of the extra abilities that you've got on it, you have to pay for. It costs $5 and you get lifetime access, which feels like pretty good value for money for me. You can generate a little, this looks new. Volcanic prairies. Okay, so we're going to go to France for a moment. It generates little this sort of EQ graphic equalizer here, which has got all these different sounds. Can you hear that? And I can take things out. I can take things out or change the nature of that environment through using these little stems. So there's cows here. I can change the sounds. It's just nice. That website, so I've just shown you just a silly little, sticks you into the middle of some French landscape somewhere, and you can add some cows and crickets and a stream and some wind. You can go to all kinds of places, and I mean, you can go everywhere. And you can generate, there's some kind of dynamically generated music and some binaural beat generators. In fact, it's the purest binaural beat generators you'll ever find because it uses pure sine waves, which is worth having a little research into. We're basically at our time. Thank you, Eileen, for your very encouraging comment. Thank you, everyone, for being here. I really appreciate your time today. So thank you so much. Please do connect with me on LinkedIn and read some of my articles, and please get the book. That'd be great. I'm sure I'll meet some of you at some point as well.